Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's 2020 IEPR Update Commissioner Workshop on assessing the future role for microgrids in California. I'm Heather Raitt, the Program Manager for the Integrated Energy Policy Report, or IEPR for short. Today's workshop is being held remotely, consistent with Executive Orders N2520 and N2920 and the recommendations of the California Department of Public Health to encourage physical distancing to slow the spread of COVID-19. Instructions for attending or participating in the meeting were provided in the notice and include both internet and call-in options. The notice is available on the Energy Commission's webpage. Instead of what used to be our normal full-day IEPR workshop, we've broken this topic into 3 sessions over 2 days in an attempt to lessen technology fatigue and encourage participation. So this morning's session is on assessing the value and role of microgrids in California. And on Thursday, July 9th, we'll have the second session starting at 10 a.m. to address microgrids for resiliency and also microgrid economics. Session 3 is also on Thursday, starting at 2 p.m. and addressing residential microgrids and emerging microgrid technologies. This meeting is being recorded. We will post a recording and a written transcript on our website. Also, today's presentations have been posted on our website. We're working on making the IEPR workshops more engaging in this remote environment, and we will be using the Q&A function in Zoom with the capability to vote on questions posed by others. So attendees may type questions for panelists by clicking on the Q&A icon. Before typing a question, please check to see if someone else has already posed a similar one. And if so, you can click the thumbs up to vote on it, and that will move the question up in the queue. Questions with the most thumbs up clicks will be upvoted to the top of the list. And then we will reserve 5 minutes at the end of each panel, or end of the panel, for attendee Q&A. And given the time restrictions, we're unlikely to elevate all questions received. Also, given the packed schedule today, we do not plan to raise attendee Q&A to the 2 presenters before the panel. Now I'll go over how to provide comments on the material in today's workshop. There'll be an opportunity for public comments at the end of the session. In Zoom, click the raise hand icon to let us know that you'd like to make a comment. And if you change your mind, you can click it again and your hand will go down. For those on the phone not using Zoom, press *9 to raise your hand. And then we will open your line during the public comment period. Alternately, written comments after the workshop are welcome, and they are due on July 30th. And again, the notice gives you all the information for providing written comments. And with that, I'll turn it over to Vice Chair Scott for opening remarks. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. And thank you so much, Heather, for your opening remarks. I am just delighted to be here this morning and spend a little time talking about microgrids with folks in the midst of our transportation-focused IEPR. As you all know, microgrids are one of the tools that will help the state get to our 100% clean energy standard in the most efficient and equitable way possible. I think that we have some really good experience to share with you from various communities across the state, low-income communities, rural communities, our military communities, really communities all across the state of California. And I look forward to hearing more information from our panelists later today about that and over on Thursday as well. And I also just want to say welcome so much to our colleagues from the Public Utilities Commission and also from the Independent System Operator. We are so delighted to have you join us this morning. And what I will do is you can either raise your hand physically or virtually, and I will be delighted to call on you to see if you have a few opening remarks before we kick off our panel. Maybe I'll start with my colleagues at the Energy Commission.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Vice Chair. And I just want to say that obviously 2020 is already proven to be a year of biblical scale challenges, from pandemic to recession, and we do face the prospect of further PSPS events. But it's also, I think, highlighting some great success in terms of the collaboration we're seeing between the agencies, particularly between the PUC and the Energy Commission on innovation. And that's really what I'm most interested today is looking at lessons learned from the microgrids that we've installed in Native American tribes and fire departments and other sites, as the Vice Chair mentioned. So I just wanted to in particular thank Commissioner Shiroma for her terrific leadership on this issue, and President Batcher as well for your ongoing leadership as we help the state prepare for the PS events that may come in the months and years ahead, and help us build resilience.
Great, thank you, Chair Hochschild. Commissioner Douglas, yes, please.
Well, just as a brief welcome, I guess, and quick opening comment, you know, it's been really interesting watching microgrids move from being a really good idea that was you know, expensive and hard to implement and challenging, and seeing the EPIC program in particular through funding a number of demonstrations with really great partners who found ways to solve technical challenges, to solve integration challenges, to solve, you know, to figure out the economics of microgrids, and to see us now in a place where this is such an important tool for the state as we move forward to address a whole series of challenges, resiliency, reliability, and finding better ways of integrating renewable energy and storage in these very robust systems. And so, you know, I have in particular been working closely with a number of tribes, some of whom have implemented microgrids. I've had an opportunity to learn quite a bit about some of the Department of Defense microgrids, for the San Diego State one, of course, which a number of the commissioners, maybe every commissioner on this workshop has done. But it's a very exciting topic. It's definitely something whose time has come, and I'm really excited to take part in this workshop and dialogue today.
Great, thank you so much, Commissioner Douglas. Let me turn to our friends at the PUC. President Batcher, would you like to make some opening remarks?
Thank you, Vice Chair Scott. Very, very briefly, because I think we have some really important ground to cover, and my esteemed colleagues on this virtual dais have already, you know, spoken to important issues that we're going to be exploring today and then on Thursday. I really want to thank my fellow commissioner, Commissioner Shiroma, who is my partner, or I am her partner. She is the lead on microgrids and the resiliency proceeding. And she did a magnificent job for the commission and for all of us by rescoping the proceeding last December, and included very important topic of resiliency, and expedited the decision, which some folks know that our processes at the PUC are somewhat archaic and time consuming. So for us to rescope and expedite a proceeding from December to June is extraordinary. And Commissioner Shiroma did that with the eye toward such an important situation of PSPS and the upcoming wildfire season. So hats off to Commissioner Shiroma and the terrific staff at the PUC. And I'm really looking forward to the workshop and learning more. I am concerned that this wildfire season, we will see a lot of diesel generation used to ensure the resiliency. And we have to get to a cleaner and quieter form of resiliency backup power. And so I'm really looking forward to those ideas and thoughts from the experts and our staffs, because it's so very important. So I really want to thank Chairman Hochschild and Vice Chairman Scott for including me in the discussion today. I'm honored. So thank you very much.
Oh, well, thank you and welcome. Let's turn to Commissioner Shiroma to see if she has some opening remarks.
I do. Thank you, Vice Chair Scott. It seems just like yesterday that Chair Hochschild and I were on the dais in San Francisco holding our, I guess you would call it a kickoff workshop on microgrids, and here we are today. So I'm pleased to join everyone on the dais, on this virtual dais. I oftentimes tout that the California Energy Commission has really mentored all of us on how to put together these workshops and hearings and what have you that include your sister agencies and has everything run so smoothly. Thank you so much for the opportunity to learn more today. We finished up the track one, as President Batcher alluded to. The staff, along with your staff at the Energy Commission, really did a Herculean job, and we've come a long ways. Now we are heading into our track two phase to meet all of the requirements of SB 1339. And Jessica Teese will be outlining all of those, the accomplishments, and then also looking ahead on the microgrids proceeding. So of course, stay tuned. I do look forward to hearing from the panels today and also on Thursday. And again, thank you to the Energy Commission for hosting this workshop. I look forward to engaging all the panelists on these important issues. Thank you.
Great, thank you and welcome. And let's see if we have opening remarks from our colleague Neil Millar from the California ISO.
Good morning, and yes, thank you. I would first like to thank all of you for the opportunity to participate in today's session. These are very important for us to have the opportunity to really understand and learn about the different flavors of microgrids that are evolving, both in terms of making sure that our existing processes are adequate for accommodating them, for managing their interconnection and the relationship with our systems, as well as further exploring what opportunities there are to take advantage of these resources and include them in our planning efforts. So thank you very much for the opportunity to participate, and we're looking forward to some really interesting material.
Great, thank you and welcome. So we're delighted to have everyone here, and with that, I am pleased to introduce our first speaker, Jessica T. from the California PUC, and she's going to provide an update on efforts to implement Senate Bill 1339. Jessica, it's all you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I am from the CPUC's Energy Division on the Resiliency and Microgrids team. And as previously mentioned, I'm going to quickly share with you some updates regarding SB 1339. Next slide, please. So in September of last year, the Commission initiated a rulemaking to design a framework to facilitate the commercialization of microgrids. And as you see in front of you here, these are the specific actions that the Commission must take to address the statutory requirements by December 1st of this year. First, developing microgrid service standards to meet state and local permitting requirements, developing methods to reduce barriers without cost shifting. Developing guidelines that determine what impact studies are required. Next, we have developing separate large corporation rates and tariffs, as well as forming a working group to codify standards and protocols. Last but not least, you see up there is developing a standard for direct current metering in Rule 21 to streamline the interconnection process, as well as lower costs for those applications. Next slide, please. So this proceeding is separated into three tracks. First, we have track one, where, as previously mentioned, we're really focused on developing fast-tracking near-term strategies and actions that we can put in place in times for this year's wildfire season outages. Just last month, those actions and strategies were voted on and became a decision, 2006-017, and I will go into more details in the upcoming slides. Track two, we're going to be focusing more on accomplishing the broader policy goals of SB 1339. So a really deeper dive into the regulatory barriers, the financial barriers, technical barriers, and so forth. And then last but not least, track three would be for the ongoing implementation of all of the SB 1339 requirements. Next slide, please. Great. So now into the details of track 1 or short-term actions. The first topic area that we've addressed is prioritizing and streamlining interconnection applications for resiliency projects. What we've done, the Commission, we've directed the IOUs to develop pre-approved single-line diagram templates to streamline interconnection. These templates are used or can be used by eligible projects for the fast-track interconnection process. We've also directed the IOUs to provide specific technical criteria that are used to determine when field inspections are necessary, so that it can help developers construct their projects in a way where it minimizes the need for field inspections versus when virtual inspections may be applicable. And then last, we've also directed the IOUs to increase their staff to their interconnection and distribution teams for faster queue processing for all projects. Next slide, please. So the second topic of track 1 is modernizing tariff to maximize resiliency benefits. First, we've allowed energy storage systems to import from the grid in advance of PSPS events, but not export. 2, we've removed the storage sizing limit for large NEM paired storage. Next slide, please. And then the last topic area is sharing information with local and tribal governments. So the goal of these actions I'm about to describe to you is really to empower local jurisdictions with a better understanding of utility infrastructure, weather events, grid operations, so that local and tribal governments will be better positioned or be in a position to make informed decisions on where to focus their resiliency planning efforts, their capital investments, and pre-event operations. So what we've done is directed the utilities to provide these type of data by having face-to-face county-level workshops. We've also directed the utilities to prepare a resiliency project engagement guide. So answering questions such as, how does one even start to engage the utilities on such projects? What are the best practices for a successful project implementation? Next slide, please. So as part of this sharing information with local and tribal governments, we've also required the utilities to have a dedicated distribution planning team for the local and tribal projects. So thinking about it as a one-stop resource. I want to quickly note that this is for SCE and SDG&E only. Separately, PG&E proposed and we approved the Community Microgrid Enablement Program. There's significant overlaps, and I will go into more detail in upcoming slides. Last but not least, we've also directed the utilities to develop a data portal for local jurisdictions to provide more information to support these projects. For instance, map layers of high fire threat districts, electrical infrastructure, weather-related information to help inform their projects. Next slide, please. Great. So now we're going to PG&E resiliency strategies. So in addition to the short-term action items that I just described, the utilities were also directed to submit proposals for immediate implementation of resiliency strategies. For PG&E, the Commission authorized infrastructure upgrades at multiple substations to interconnect generation in the event of an outage. You may be familiar of their name, the Make Ready program. 2, we've authorized the deployment of temporary diesel generators for this year's wildfire season. You may have heard of the name TempGen or Temporary Generation Program. As the name implies, this is a short-term localized solution until the transmission and distribution system that is hardened. Unfortunately, when we were looking into this, there were just not any plug-and-play alternatives, but we are doing everything we can to transition away from diesel generation to alternative clean backup power. In fact, just a real quick plug, we do have a diesel workshop coming up next month, so more on that. Look out for more information on that. It's coming from it soon. Next, we also authorized PG&E to provide technical and financial support for community requested microgrids. So this is similar to the action items that I just described earlier. So this program, you may have heard the name Community Microgrid Enablement Program, CMEP. I do want to note here that as part of this program, there is a one-time funds that will be made available to help defray the cost of special facilities or distribution system upgrades. Next slide, please. So for SDG&E, the Commission authorized the procurement of a local area distribution controller, which is a proprietary software and hardware solution to enhance their microgrid operations. Next slide, please. All right, so really, that was really quick, but those were the actions we took in track 1 to achieve microgrid commercialization and towards resiliency. So we started to address the statutory requirements, and we're going to continue to work on meeting those requirements by December of this year. So for more details, I do want to highlight that the Commission put out a scoping memo last Friday, if you would like more details on the schedule of activity. So definitely a lot more to come before the end of this year. And I think that's it for all of my slides. Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Jessica. Let me see if there are any questions from my fellow dais mates. If so, now's a great time to ask Jessica. Okay, I'm seeing shaking heads on all the ones that I can see. So thank you so much for your excellent presentation. We appreciate that very much.
Thank you so much.
And we will go on, we're glad to have you, to our next presentation, which will be from Mike Gravely at the California Energy Commission. Mike, take it away.
Well, good morning. Again, I'm Mike Gravely. I'm a senior engineer from the Research and Development Division, and I want to cover a brief review of our experience and active participation in microgrids. Next slide, please. The R&D division has 3 main funding sources right now. The EPIC program is by far the largest, about $130 million a year. We have a natural gas program, and we also have a special fund program, and one of the programs under that is the Food Processing Incentive Program, and they also have funded several microgrids. Next chart, please. The Industry Commission and the R&D division has a long history with microgrids. Go back almost a decade. We were looking at the early stages of research and just connecting renewables to storage, to generation, to the grid, so you could switch back and forth and not shut down the grid, not shut down the customer. We then shifted, when microgrids became more popular, we shifted to more integrated microgrids and working on controller technology and being able to perform different functions and being able to isolate from the grid successfully and reconnect. And then we've shifted now to where we're focusing a lot on commercialization. One of the things I failed to mention earlier, our R&D program, ultimate goal is to bring products to a commercial success. So in this microgrid area, we're trying to do research and provide knowledge with the ultimate goal of microgrids being a commercial product that people can literally buy and choose as they need and at a price range that's affordable for the people who want to use them. Next chart. We are fortunate to have a considerable amount of money invested. We currently have over 45, and we have another 4 to 5 microgrids that we'll be awarding over the summer. In that area, it's a very popular research topic. It's addressing a lot of energy challenges. Resiliency is probably the most important area, but overall, just understanding how microgrids can help industry, communities, and customers is an element that we are doing a lot. We are a public program, so everything we do is shared. All of our technical results are shared. And so one of our goals is to get that information out. So today's workshop will be part of it. You will be hearing today from several of the awardees that are on this list. Next chart. So we also have the benefit and the value of a wide variety of microgrid applications. So critical facilities are always one of the top of the list of people needing microgrids, military bases and ports, community scale information, and also industrial. And then what's not shown here is that many of these microgrids are in low income and disadvantaged communities. We have a large support from the Native American tribe community. So we're doing our best to evaluate these microgrids to determine where they apply the best and where they provide an economics so that they don't require government support to maintain them. Next chart. So if you take a lesson learned, we'll cover two areas, the site level and then the policy level. So if you look at the site of a microgrid, a customer who wants a microgrid, many of the current microgrids you'll hear today that we have would not have happened without the government funding, the research funding we did. But it's a microgrid is a complex engineering process. So it's not a simple thing. You just go take it and plug it in. It's not a self-running system. So customers need to take the time to plan properly. What do they really want the microgrid to do for them? What services, what value, and what cost it is, and is it worth their investment? Once they've made a decision, they need to do proper engineering analysis so that the system is properly integrated. They can get their permitting and their interconnection requirements. So again, it takes technical expertise to do that. And most of these microgrids are designed to operate 10 to 15 to 20 years, so that the owner also has to make that decision of how they're going to do that. As I mentioned earlier, we have three types of models for ownership. That's a utility-owned, a customer-owned, and a third-party owned. And each one of those scenarios has a different way that they would plan their future maintenance. But as far as the customer is concerned, proper planning, proper execution, and proper maintenance are critical to the microgrid being successful. Next chart. If you look at the program level throughout the state and throughout the country, obviously we're here today and there's a lot of people participating because microgrids have a huge potential to address different issues in California and the country, and also to help us meet our future policy goals. However, it is also understood today, and we will talk about this in some of the future sessions on today and on Thursday, about the business case and understanding exactly why someone made a decision and what the value they're getting from it is. It's also good to understand, some people think that the grid should be a grid of microgrids, but realistically, microgrids don't fit everywhere. And so part of the question is, where are microgrids the best fit, and where do they provide the value that makes the most sense? Also, I mentioned the different ownership models make a difference in how you handle it. Today, they're starting to shift to things like power purchase agreements to make the financing easier for the customer, and those types of environments going forward. Most of the microgrids that we have, the 45 microgrids we have some utility owned and operated microgrids, but the vast majority of our microgrids, over 90%, are customer owned or third party owned microgrids. So that's where a lot of our experience lies. Also, just understanding how microgrids can manage the energy, can handle separation, can handle wildfire, PSPS events, and other things is another case for us to understand. One of the areas we get is, what is the value for reliability? What is the value for resiliency? What is the value for clean air? Those are things that we have to work on to find a way to put an economic value so you can make these business cases. And also, today's meeting and Thursday's meeting will help us understand, is there a role the government and regulation can play to help define these questions and to help microgrids end up in the places where they're the most valuable? Next chart. So this is a very wordy chart, but I'll summarize it very briefly. For those of you who have microgrids that are not currently funded by the CEC, you've seen our list. We have a mapping system that can tell you where they are and how they relate to disadvantaged communities, low-income communities, wildfire zones. We would like to add the microgrids that are not part or not funded by the commission. From understanding from researchers, we have, as we said, about 45 microgrids. My understanding is about 80 to 100 microgrids are active in the state of California. So we would like to we have about half. Like to get the other half so we can share that information and learn from those systems also. So there is a request here for those of you online and those of you know of microgrids, if you will be happy enough to share your location with us and a little information, then please respond to what's on this page, and then we'll be glad to include you. That will be a public database that will be on the commission website for anybody to view in the future. Next chart. And with that, I am ready for any kind of questions from the dais that you have, and then we'll transition to the first panel. Commissioner Scott.
All right, that sounds great. Thank you so much for your excellent presentation, Mike. I also want to echo Mike's call for the data on microgrids. So please do make sure if you've got some information on the microgrids that are not funded by the Energy Commission that you could share with us to send it to Mike and his team. Let me turn to my fellow dais mates and see if anyone has questions for Mike. Looks like Chair Hochschild. Yes, please.
Yeah, so thank you, Mike, and also thank you for your ongoing work over many years, getting us to where we are today. One of the things I'm interested in is the prospect of finding a useful second life for electric vehicle batteries. So what we're finding now, we're about 750,000 electric vehicles have been sold in the state of California, and we have many more coming. 18 electric vehicle manufacturers in the state. EVs are our #1 export from the state today. But what we're finding is that when the range of the battery gets down to about 75–80% of the nameplate rating of the battery, people want to swap it out, right? And so, but that battery still has a very long potential second life before it needs to get recycled. And I'm just curious, do we have any microgrids so far or in development that you're aware of that are using used EV batteries? And do you have any thoughts about this? Because it seems to me it would meet a couple needs, including potentially reducing the cost of microgrids, and also reducing the waste stream. And I'm just curious if you've given any thought to that or have any insight.
Yes, sir. So I'm happy to say that we actually do have a project that is using second-use batteries and microgrids. We have a grant funding opportunity where there were 2 grants awarded last month and 2 more to be awarded tomorrow. I'm not sure which one of those 4 there are, but one of them actually does have, is in fact applying second-use batteries to microgrids, and the other projects are looking at to assess the value, the duration of second-use batteries. So I think most people feel that there's an opportunity to get, depending on your particular use profile and things. So I do think we will find in the future that some of these second-use battery research will give people a portfolio of how the vehicle battery works. And I agree, if we reach 5 million vehicles on the road, based on our goal, there will be a lot in the future of these batteries. And so, yes, sir, we are evaluating one specific project, and then we're also evaluating batteries and comparing it to other batteries so we can have an understanding of how does that technology fit for microgrids. And it's very likely that it will be a popular solution in the future.
Great. Are there other questions from my fellow Dias mates? Oh, yes, Commissioner Sharoma, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike, for the excellent presentation. You did a call out for folks who got operating microgrids to send in their information so that the Energy Commission can become a clearinghouse for what's happening across the state of California, and I definitely support that effort. Do you also foresee that you become a clearinghouse for best practices, for your sharing of microgrid technologies, models, where there's a sort of one-stop look-see on your website for folks who are interested in the state of microgrids, small and large? Do you foresee that would be something that you're already doing, or that it would be a next step?
So fortunately, you will hear on Thursday from one of our researchers, in fact, that is doing a CEC-funded project to develop a publicly available, easy-to-use microgrid tool. It's supposed to be available before the end of the year online, and so that's from LBNL is actually developing that. And so so we are developing that tool, and we are making it available to the public, and it's supposed to have people go through and help them evaluate at any level whether a microgrid will fit their needs and what it would cost and what their variabilities are. So we are in the process of working the alpha version of that model now. They expect to make it online available before the end of the calendar year. And so that will answer one question. And the second thing is we do envision having some technology workshops not just Wiper workshop, but where we just share the results of our different projects, and we have our microgrids talk about what's working and what's not. So we envision in the fall having just basically a technology transfer workshop. So we're trying very hard to get the information out, but yes, we have taken on that role. They've been working about 18 months on that model, and it's actually IEPR, not LBNL that's doing it. And so the model is, again, we envision it being useful, and we will be taking feedback from customers as they use it. So we have a 2-year maintenance effort on it, so that as the people use it, we can modify it if it's too hard to use or whatever. So I think to answer your questions, we hope before this year is up to have a tool available, and certainly your office and Forrest will be actively involved as we do the wringing out of the software. Thank you.
Excellent. Glad to hear. Thank you. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you. And I think I saw everyone else shaking their heads when I asked about questions. So I will say thank you so much, Mike, for your excellent presentation. And I will turn it back to Heather. I'll do a reminder for my fellow Dias mates. While the panel is presenting, if you'd like to turn your camera off, that's fine. Just please remember to turn it back on when we get back to our discussion part. And as the fellow panelists are on their way, it's time for them to turn on their cameras. And I will turn it to Heather to provide additional instruction.
Great. Thank you, Vice Chair. This is Heather Wright. And before we start the panel, I'd just like to ask people to click the raise hand function in Zoom if you plan to make a comment during the public comment period. So at the end of the session at about 11:30, we'll open lines one at a time for those who've raised their hand. And so in Zoom, you can click the raise hand icon, and if you're on the phone, you can raise your hand by pressing *9. And so if you can go ahead and do that now, that helps us plan for the public comment period. And if you change your mind, you can just press that raise hand icon again, and it'll lower your hand. So with that, I will go ahead and we can get started on our panel. The panel is on what is working and why for microgrids, design considerations and operational lessons learned. It's moderated by David Earn from the Energy Commission, and Ching Tian from the Energy Commission will help moderate Q&A from attendees. So we'll have a series of short presentations. And so David, if you could go ahead and start your panel, please. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Heather. So again, I'm David Earn. I'm from the R&D division within the Energy Commission. Today's panel is actually probably the most technical of the panels for this microgrid workshop. We brought together some different perspectives on the design and operation of microgrids from the end user, the developer, and the aggregator perspective. And all of them have had a focus on critical facilities. So that'll be a theme throughout facilities and operations, and that'll be a theme throughout the presentations. We have 4 panel members. They'll each give about a 5-minute introductory comment period. And then we'll follow that with questions from the dais and then public Q&A. Before I introduce the panel members, and I'll have them all go one after the other, I'll reiterate Heather's comment, which is if you have a question, use the Q&A function. Please use the thumbs up feature if your question's already in there, because that'll help raise it to the top, and Ching will be able to curate those better for the public comment or public Q&A session. And then separately use the raise hand function if you want to make a comment at the end of the workshop. So our 4 panelists, all bringing different perspectives. We have first John Griffiths of Contech, who has a fair amount of experience with healthcare facilities, a variety of sizes and styles. Next will be Vipul Gore from Gridscape Solutions. His service offering has brought microgrids together for a variety of critical facilities, including fire and police stations, shelters, et cetera. So he'll talk about his design philosophy and structures for that. Next is Mick Wasco, who's from Marine Corps Air Station Miramar. They've developed a microgrid for the broad facility there. And the interesting aspect about that one is they're utilizing landfill gas as part of the generation portion of that microgrid. So he'll talk a little bit about that as well. And last is Jesse Denver from East Bay Community Energy, where they're developing their strategy for how they, as the CCA and the community is looking for their role and approaches for them for supporting critical facilities and microgrids. So those are our four panelists, and I will turn it over first to John Griffiths, who will provide his healthcare perspective.
Good morning. Can you hear me? Am I on video?
We can hear you, John, but your video is
Yay,
not.
good morning.
There we go.
Sorry about that.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Well, good morning. Nice to meet everybody virtually. Thank you, David, for the introduction. So, in my 5 minutes, I'd just like to run through, most of my perspective here is going to be, focused on healthcare, and really my sort of entry into the microgrid experience was through the CEC funded microgrid project at Kaiser Richmond, which is hosted by Kaiser. So with that, can I have the next slide, please? As David mentioned, most of my business perspective is through healthcare, designing, delivering, and helping facilities operate it. I'm also a consulting member of the Hospital Building Safety Board. And as we talk about design considerations and lessons learned, also what we're going to talk about here is proposed electrical power systems that we're taking lessons learned from these projects at a Hospital Building Safety Board and helping, excuse me, how can we apply those to future more sustainable power systems for hospitals. So the approach we're taking is firstly a hybrid approach where we're going to utilize alternate power systems, very similar to the Kaiser Richmond project, where we have, and I'll talk about that in a later slide in a couple of minutes, where we're using solar storage and/or fuel cells to supplement the traditional backup power system. And this is for the essential power. And then ultimately, we can, on other traditionally more medical office buildings where they either have very small emergency power systems just for life safety or no backup power systems. And we're looking at supplanting the traditional or providing emergency power systems where certainly from the market we're seeing or operations, we're seeing a big desire, particularly, and again, most of this is driven from the PSPS, where they have medical refrigerators and some basic functions that they either, if they lose power or PS, they have to offsite the medications, and hopefully if we have solar storage with microgrids, they're able to operate the building to keep basic systems going, but also hopefully to even provide basic medical services. So can I have the next slide, please? So, doing that is a lot of advantages, and from an traditional essential power system in a healthcare environment, which is typically a diesel generator. I know you all know this, but we are able to utilize renewables. A generator, it's a very expensive asset. It is the only time you get value is in an emergency power outage. For hospitals and healthcare facilities, they're in a very difficult financial position before COVID-19 and probably even after. So any grant funding available would be a huge advantage for them. And fuel deliveries in the PSPS, certainly that is a major challenge. And something I'd like to talk about is noise and exhaust. Diesel generators, the traditional systems, again, with the long outages, certainly from my clients, hearing that's something that if we can provide solutions so we don't have a 5-day diesel generator working in a urban area, would be a huge advantage to the community. Next slide, please. So that's all fine, but there's a lot of challenges delivering this, particularly in healthcare, which is first it's institutional inertia. Healthcare is highly regulated, probably rightly so. It's delivering essential services. So there's a lot of barriers and challenges we need to overcome. There's risk. In California construction, it's very risk averse. There's a perceived capital expense, complexity, cybersecurity. There's many challenges that we need to overcome. But backing up, and I can talk about that later, in design considerations and lessons learned. Representing the Hospital Building Safety Board, we've engaged in setting up a white paper committee to develop that so we can expedite adoption of microgrids. So if I could have a next slide, please. So that's a lot of pictures, a lot of text, but this is a quick overview of the Kaiser Richmond microgrid. Very simply, I don't know if you're familiar with this project. I feel personally and professionally very proud to be associated with this. This is providing renewable power in a disadvantaged community, and it's one of the only critical access hospitals in the area. So, thank you to CEC to making it happen. So, very quickly, this comprises of a 200 kilowatt solar array on the roof that serves a 1 megawatt hour lithium-ion battery in the basement. Of the parking structure, and we can talk about that later. It is under city jurisdiction, and then that then feeds the power into the hospital, which is under OSHPD hospital jurisdiction. So this is able to provide, offset the normal power usage and demand response in normal situations, but in an unfortunate event where we lose utility and the existing emergency power system, we have islanded this project, and I know, David, you were on site when we did that. So that is adding a very high level of resilience. And if that unfortunate situation happens, we can operate the life safety branch, which is the highest level of acuity in the hospital for a particularly extended period of time. So next slide, please. Oh, sorry, I'm trying to get everything in 5 minutes. So this is a quick graphic just showing how, over the 3 years that we've had this system set up, as we tune the system, we are able to generate, pretty appreciable kilowatt hour savings, but we're also providing financial savings to the facility through demand response. Next slide, please. So that's it. I think I'm under 5 minutes, and assume probably the next presenter. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, John. We'll go ahead and move on to Vipul, who will go next.
Hi, this is Vipul Gaur. See if I can. Okay, can you hear me and see my presentation?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you all. Thanks for the conference today. I'm deeply honored to be presenting in front of the commission and this audience. As a resident of California for a long time, California is far ahead in making bold decisions in the policy framework for our clean energy future. And I really thank and appreciate the work the Commission, California Energy Commission, CPUC, and CAISO is doing in making this reality for us as well as our future generations. A quick introduction to Gridscape. We are a startup, clean technology startup based in Fremont. And we've been in business for about 6-7 years. We have a very long-standing relationship with California Energy Commission. We have been recipient of several EPIC funded grants that has enabled us to build our microgrid technology and commercialize it. We are on our path to commercialize our microgrids, and I'll present the things we have done so far, what technical solutions we have provided, and some challenges. Okay. Next slide. Thank you. So this is our critical facility microgrid network. We have about 5 microgrids in operation. They've been operating for about 2-3 years now, especially in the city of Fremont, where we have 5 station microgrids. There was originally EPIC funded, CEC funded project, finished in 2018-19. We have another 15 in several design and construction phases. And we plan to do more than 50 microgrids by 2021-2022. As you can see, our focus really is into small to mid-size critical facility systems, businesses that have critical resiliency needs, and we cater to very different verticals. So starting from government critical facilities like fire stations and police stations, all the way to residential communities, food processing plant, and grocery stores. So we intend to get our systems deployed through each one of these, more modular and a scalable product-centric focus. Next slide. Yeah, these are the pictures of some of the microgrids that we have already deployed. As you can see, there are some of the fire stations. Some of them are grocery stations and so on. And it kind of give you, a few of these have been operating for several years now. And we have good operating experience on those microgrids. Next page. Our goal is to kind of take a product-centric approach to microgrid systems. So traditionally, microgrids have been custom designed and for each different types of situation, and that's not scalable. So we took a different approach. Our technology and systems are based on more of a product-centric approach in a modular and a scalable fashion. So you can actually scale the microgrid or make it modular. And then it's mainly software driven. So we standardize on the hardware, the interfaces, and then provide the differences to different type of verticals based on the software. And we've been quite successful in doing that over the last 5-6 years. As you can see in the bottom of this chart here, our version 1.0 was kind of a 20-foot container option back in 2016-17. And then we went into modular kind of approach. And then we did more box type design that we are deploying now at several locations. And every time we did that, we are able to achieve about 30 to 50% cost reduction, not just on the product, but also in terms of deployment and standardizing interconnections and designs and all of that. Next slide. This kind of slide shows the whole design and operations of our microgrid. The lower half of this slide shows how the PV system and the load, whether they are critical loads or EV chargers, are kind of connected in the microgrid. Our box, as you can see in the middle, is where the battery system and the controller resides, and is connected to a cloud system that connects to different parts of the network, whether it's a utility back office or what have you. And the idea here is to kind of provide two modes, both grid tied and off grid. In the grid tied mode, you can provide energy savings, demand charge reduction, and all those energy services, grid services. And when there is a real event of microgrid, let's PSPS event or an outage, then the system can safely isolate from the grid and continue to provide clean power to the facility for whatever time it is basically designed to do that. And next slide. So here are some challenges and opportunities we see in terms of kind of how we have been deploying the system. So the first challenge we see is private financing, and this is essential for commercialization. Our focus is a small critical facility microgrids. They are very difficult to finance fully with private financing. So my recommendation and suggestion is to continue incentive programs, establish the value of resilience, whether it's a microgrid tariff or displacement cost of fossil fuels, create new ancillary grid service revenue for cluster of microgrids. CAISO has a good program where you can actually have a large, let's say energy resource or storage resource. You can actually provide grid services on it, but we need to be able to be creative in terms of providing on a cluster, continue grant projects, and other big point here is that provide prioritize subsidies for smaller projects, because large microgrid projects are financeable and do not need subsidies, but small projects like fire stations typically, they really need subsidies right now in this market until prices drop. Second big challenge is time to deploy. I had a lot of conversation with CPUC on this, and I'm very happy to see the work they have done in terms of SB 1339. The time it takes to interconnect and the permit process, standardize designs, building codes, standardize the interconnection process, and so on. The third important point I'd like to make is awareness and decision making. A lot of critical facility operators need a lot of education in terms of importance of microgrids. And so, develop some market outreach awareness programs. I think point number 2 there is important to actually promote a data-driven approach. We have all the data. We know where exactly, we can get energy savings, where we can get good solar production. If that data is provided to companies or, then we can actually figure out which sites best benefits and are financially possible, bankable in terms of energy savings and resilience. Further building code development and so on, and standardized community microgrids. And final point I would like to make is cost to deploy. The material cost, batteries and PV, they kind of go up and down. It kind of over a longer period of time goes down. But because of the tariffs and market uncertainty, we have seen the prices fluctuate, and that kind of creates a problem for companies like us who are trying to deploy several of these microgrids. So idea is to promote a product-centric approach and kind of figure out a way to standardize and decrease and stabilize those prices. Next slide. And that's it. I think that's what I wanted to present. We'll be happy to answer any questions for me in the question answer session. On to the next speaker.
Great, we'll move on to Mick.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to present on MCAS Miramar. Hold on, starting my video here. I work for Utilities and Energy Management at Marine Corps Station Miramar in San Diego. I've been doing energy there since 2012. And this installation microgrid has been my entire career, pretty much. Next slide. So a bit of history. I'm going to talk about the installation microgrid today, but in 2012, we also studied or started a parallel path where we were doing research/demonstration microgrids, in which we completed a 100% renewable microgrid for our building, which was solar and battery storage with no spinning generation, just for the record. In 2016, we successfully demonstrated that. It took $3 million and quite a bit of effort to get that done. And I consider that a huge learning experience for what we're doing in the bigger installation microgrid project, which, make no mistake about it, was a capital investment from the Marine Corps for mission assurance and resilience. So the $20 million microgrid supplemented existing on-site renewable resources. So you can see we get about, or the details are on the next slide, but we get about half of our electricity from landfill power, and that's unique through a power purchase agreement. We also have about 1.7 megawatts of PV on the installation at this point. The microgrid project itself was a $20 million investment that essentially built a central power plant that enables us to island all of our critical loads. And so when you see that airfield there, the entire airfield is powered by the microgrid system, and we have the flexibility with all of our resources to choose what sections of the base get powered. But in terms of capacity, the power plant is designed to carry out all airfield operations. In addition, we have some other resources that are being integrated. As part of a CEC EPIC grant that was awarded a couple years ago, we will be installing large-scale battery storage and also a robust demand response control mechanism within the microgrid as well. Next slide. So here are all of those DERs by the resources or by the numbers. And it's a bit complicated because everything's kind of in motion right now, and the battery storage EPIC project is still in design. The power plant is finalizing commissioning, and that landfill power has been going on for since 2012. So everything's a work in progress. There are some other assets in the system, such as a vehicle to grid demonstration that's being done with the CEC as well. A lot of those assets are just opportunities for us to research these ideas and concepts later as part of demonstrations. But you know, the main focus of the microgrid at Miramar is for resilience for the Marine Corps to ensure that we can carry out our mission at all times given any state of the country. And that requirement is actually for 14 days. So next slide. Very proud to state, and I got very lucky to do this webinar after the fact, but we had our first couple of successful island tests for the entire operation just a couple weeks ago in June. So this is it's insanely exciting for me. My entire career has led up to that moment to see these things actually work. And so this screenshot, you can see all of our power plant assets as well as our landfill power contributing to powering the entire installation at Miramar. So if you remember a couple slides back of that aerial view, that's over 500 facilities. Pretty much like a small city. I wouldn't be surprised if the loads were the same as the hospital, but because you know, it is not a very big base. You know, our average load is only 8 or you know 9 megawatts. But in terms of complexity, there's certainly a lot of variability with different types of buildings and different types of missions going on. So during that testing, we were able to do some stress tests that are very interesting. We simulated losing landfill power and also losing diesel generation. And so I could talk about those technical details at length, but I'll rather give opportunity for questions later. I'll just clarify that on this page, you have to recognize that our system is still in commissioning and there are some data points that are not accurate or not complete yet. For example, the PV bar on the right shows doesn't show any values, but that's because the meters are currently not linked. But all of those PV systems were operating and contributing to the grid as well. The bar next to that that says loading is waiting for our future battery to get integrated into that DER set. If you go to the next slide. So just more comments about what it takes to make this happen. I think what I bring to the discussion today is just not sugarcoating any of this microgrid stuff. It's taken a very long time, very difficult to implement, especially at an installation scale. All of the tenants, remember there's 10,000 people at MCS Miramar that had to be affected by just one day of testing to have a base-wide outage and all of that coordination, especially with all the different team members. And you know, the future of microgrids is definitely not to be understated with, we now have a new microgrid operator who's going to be operating the system full time. So in terms of economics, there's a lot of interesting conversations to have about Miramar and the microgrid as it relates to economics in the future. We are not intended to island ourselves all the time. It's meant as a backup system, but all of our investments have been made to try and support the local grid and to try and do so as cost effectively as possible. So I'll leave it at that, and you can go to the next slide and I'll finish up.
Great, thank you, Mick. I appreciate it. And we'll now move on to Jesse.
Jesse, you're still muted.
Great, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, perfect. Well, thanks so much for inviting EBCE to the conversation. Quick overview of who we are. East Bay Community Energy is the load serving CCA program in Alameda County, and we will also begin serving the city of Tracy in neighboring San Joaquin County in 2021. The structure of EBCE is that we're a joint power authority whose members include 14 cities and the county of Alameda itself. And we are governed by a board of directors that's made up of elected officials from each of our JPA member communities. Next slide, please. So over the last year, EBC has been working with these local government partners to determine when there is a major grid outage, where will people go, what will they need from the cities and the county, and will the critical facilities be ready? So these facilities range from EOCs, fire and police departments, rec centers, schools, libraries, which all serve critical functions of ensuring that the community has light and security, warm places to sleep, food and drink, communication, medical support, and general people to help the community in response to a major grid outage. And so over the course of the last year, we've been working with these local government partners to identify what critical facilities they have and what those loads at those critical facilities are that need to be met by solar and storage. And I should mention that we're also collaborating with Peninsula Clean Energy, who is the CCA serving San Mateo County on this project. So together, we've developed an initial portfolio of almost 500 facilities in 26 cities across the two counties, Alameda and San Mateo County. And we work to score those 500 facilities to prioritize facilities that had a lower hazard exposure and a higher service value to the community. So what we looked at was, were facilities in a fault or liquefaction zone? Were they susceptible to flooding and other types of hazards? And also looked at how easy was it for the community to, for example, walk to a particular facility to be able to get these services. So from that prioritized list of about 425 facilities, we worked with our technical consultant, Arup, to actually size solar and storage systems to meet the critical loads at these priority sites. And we're currently determining the best path forward to deploy these systems at scale across such a large portfolio. Next slide, please. So to that end, in May, we issued a request for information to gain industry insight on the following sections of the RFI. Section 1 was the value of aggregated procurement. There's been a number of regional bulk procurement efforts over the last 10 to 15 years for solar in the Bay Area on public facilities. And they've resulted in system deployment, but not at the scale and within the time frame that we need to do so today. So we really wanted to figure out how this could be done more efficiently and the role of the CCA in helping to expedite that. Section 2 of the RFI was on preferred procurement pathways, and I'll cover that in the next slide. Section 3, we asked industry to give us some feedback on foreseeable challenges with the approach of issuing a RFP for such a large portfolio of facilities across so many jurisdictions. We also asked the industry to provide us feedback on potential challenges with existing PV systems. Some of these critical facilities have deployed solar through power purchase agreements, and so we would need to retrofit those systems with battery energy storage. So what are the legal and kind of contractual challenges associated with that? And next slide, please. With regards to the procurement models, these are the specific options that we outlined in the RFI. So we're all very familiar with the traditional PPA model, and that was option A. And we asked for feedback on these other options, including option B, which is where the CCA would actually fill the role as the central PPA counterparty. The other options included a public sector partner purchasing the project outright, and or the public sector issuing a bond to be able to fund these projects. So what you can see here is that the industry feedback we received, and we did receive 18 responses to the RFI, that overwhelmingly, the preference was for this option B, the CCAs being the central PPA counterparty. And so the CCAs are currently discussing how we would do that and how we would develop a standardized kind of PPA contract that we could negotiate with each of our local government partners and then sign with the private sector industry partner. And the intent here is to reduce complexity of negotiating contracts. Next slide, please. Just to wrap up, some of the other areas that we received feedback from the RFI included the best practices and improvements of aggregated procurement, really standardizing what the systems do across the entire portfolio, ensuring that we have early buy-in from our public partners, so really getting that top-down approval for participating in this project to ensure that when industry bids on this, the projects will get built. The industry did indicate that they really felt that from the perspective of customer acquisition, the CCAs having this central role of organizing the portfolio of projects would result in time savings. And there is this value of the CCAs in providing some of the upfront site development work, which industry indicated they'd be willing to reimburse the CCAs for doing. And this, in turn, would lower their risk of projects not being viable. And then from the perspective of existing solar PV systems, there will be challenges with addressing those existing PPA contractual relationships and retrofitting those systems with battery energy storage. So we're trying to figure out what that looks like. And then other foreseeable challenges from the industry's perspective include potential COVID-19 delays, IOU interconnection. Some felt like they might have some supply chain delays, and then just the public site access constraints, again, tied to COVID. So next steps for the CCAs is we're determining internally how the CCAs can fill the role of being the PPA counterparty across this portfolio of sites with our local government partners, and we'll be bringing our partners together over the next couple months to discuss that in more detail and get some commitments around the procurement next steps. And we tentatively aim to issue an RFP for the portfolio of sites in later this year or into early 2021. Thanks so much.
Great, thank you, Jesse. So that completes all our panelists. So I'll turn it back over to the Vice Chair. If there are any questions from the dais.
Okay, thank you so much to David. I want to say thank you to John and Vipul, Mick, and Jesse for a fascinating and informative panel. Let me ask both the panelists and also my fellow dais mates to please turn on your videos so that we can have a group discussion together. And I have a few questions, but let me open it up and see if some of my dais mates have questions they'd like to start with. Everyone's a little shy. Oh, yes, please, Commissioner Sharoma, go ahead.
Oh, excellent presentations. Thank you to each of our panel presenters. Well, here's my question, and you can choose to answer it or not answer it. We've got our track 2 proceeding underway. We just issued a scoping memo last Friday on it. Lots more to follow. But for each of our presenters, if there's one specific thing that takes top priority from your perspective that the CPUC should focus on within our track 2 rubric, what would it be?
I can go first. Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Sharma. So yeah, interconnection challenges still remain for us. I think that's one important. There was a lot of work done in the track 1 on interconnection, but I think that still remains a challenge for us. And then you asked one, but I'm going to give you 2. The second one is financing challenge. We still need to make sure these microgrids are financially viable and bankable for small sites, and challenges remain there to make it fully financially viable. So those are the two main. Those two things don't let me sleep at night at this right now.
Okay, Vipul, can you elaborate on some of the challenges with the interconnection that you still experience?
So we've been having. So it's a great question. So prior to SB 1339 activities, we had a lot of challenges. I mean, interconnection would take us 9 months and 12 months, and so on. I mean, it's really long. After 1339, the pain has reduced. Some of these processes have streamlined. We have actually the right people we are talking to in the interconnection teams to standardize the design. It's a back and forth discussion we are having, which is all very good right now. I mean, I'm in midst of 3 or 4 of those discussions with SC, PG&E, and all of SDG&E right now as we speak. But still, I think there are headwinds. Sometimes it just takes a long time for us to basically make a point and get going. The way I always compare is, David, a residential interconnection takes like a week or 10 days to interconnect. And any like a fire station or a police station, if I have to interconnect, it still takes 6 to 9 months. And that's the problem. We have to figure out a way to get a standardized design and just get it done very quickly. And that's what we are having issues with right now.
Thank you. And I think, John, you wanted to make some comments?
Yeah, thank you, Vipul. I would second that. Yeah, certainly a number of projects I'm involved in that the interconnection sets the critical path. And I think the other side is, in terms of delivering these projects, I think, Mick, you said these are challenging projects to deliver until we get more used to that. And I think if there's a way we can find to simplify the interconnection, so the effort that teams put into the interconnection, getting the projects interconnected, can then focus on delivering value, choosing better design, optimizing the controls. We're sort of reinforcing that point, but I think you asked that, what's the one thing, and I would certainly second that.
I could add some different points. For me, the interconnection was not too much of a struggle. So it's very interesting that everybody has different perspectives. For me, then I have 2 real main things. We've been developing our project for nearly a decade, and at this point, to kind of kill 2 birds with one stone, one of the questions online was talking about departing load charges. And the reality is that I have no idea how the economics of our microgrid system is going to work in the future. We designed and built it to support the grid and levelize our load with the utility and become a better, easier customer. And there's currently no tariff or economic opportunity to do that. And the other thing I would comment on is just policy. And I definitely agree with the goals of a cleaner and quieter resilience. But at this time, we are just trying to achieve resilience. And in the Marine Corps, our requirement is 14 days. Our system has the capability of running 21 days just off of the resources that we have on site, thanks to renewables. And the fact of the matter is that because we have diesel and natural gas, although it is currently the most clean diesel and natural gas that could even be built, it's still sort of looked at as not a true microgrid in the state of California. And that's my challenge, is that I have tremendous opportunity to use clean natural gas to be a better customer of SDG&E, support the grid, and provide complete and total resilience to the military, but there is zero economic incentive to do that, because our departing load charges essentially cancel out any benefit that we have of just a minimal use of peak shaving with natural gas. So in general, those are my biggest things: economic opportunity and not having technical policy against a certain technology, because microgrids should not be curtailed to a certain technology by policy at this point.
So this is Janaea Scott. I'd like to throw in a question here, which is all of you have mentioned at one point in your presentations that it's difficult to overcome the institutional inertia and that there's a lot of education that needs to be done around microgrids. And I was wondering if you would be willing to provide some insight onto either whether it was a data point that was most compelling, or what it was that was most persuasive to the folks that you are working with to get them to want to build a microgrid and go down this pathway with us. And I think that's important as we are looking towards the commercialization of microgrids, like Mike Gravely mentioned a little bit earlier.
I could go first on that because it's the easiest for the military. It really starts with leadership and buy-in from the customer. You can't have a technology or an outside stakeholder trying to achieve something for an entity. They have to want it themselves. And so I think having that project champion within the organization is the solution to following through on these projects for me. And that's for us, then our commanding officer on the installation has had full buy-in into our microgrid program for the last decade. Even though that military officer changes over every 2 years, it's really easy to continue that continuity.
I can go next. So yeah, Vice Chair Scott, for us, the thing that really caught attention of the interconnection teams for us is the standardized cookie cutter design. I mean, that's our approach. It is the same standard box design that we're going to deploy in all the locations. That's simplified, and that caught attention with all the people who are addressing or doing the interconnection study and the whole process. From their perspective, every time there is a different design, they have to kind of see how it is going to destabilize the grid, or what is the impact on the grid, on the distribution grid. But if you have a standard design, same type of battery system, same power level, same type of way to connect and disconnect, that simplifies a lot. And I think that caught attention from our design perspective.
Yeah. So can I try to make sure I answer? Try and answer your question? I think it was your question. What overcame the institutional inertia? Was that the? I think it was your question.
I was wondering what it was that convinced the person to say yes. Okay, you can go ahead and build this microgrid.
Yeah. Well, totally frank, I think there's a CEC grant. Great. Well, that sounds awesome. I think, being perfectly frank. Just thinking about had a little bit of time to think about that, and I think the other point is leadership within organizations. I think Bernard Tyson, before he unfortunately passed away, he was a big advocate, at Kaiser for more sustainable solutions, and I think we're delivering microgrids at different organizations, but I think it's great that California is providing that leadership. But I think there's also a place at corporate leadership to challenge. Because it's, if a organization comes to an engineer or somebody says, "Look, I need backup for this PSPS," the default solution, okay, diesel generator, there you go. But I think maybe corporate leadership, and it's great that the Marine Corps are doing this. I think that has a place in driving this as well at state level. And anyway, that's maybe a slightly different perspective that may help.
And I'd just add that in addition to the top-down leadership buy-in, that having the technical support for these organizations, like that's coming from the CCAs right now, is really helpful, because cities and counties don't have staff who have the bandwidth or the knowledge and expertise to be able to move these projects forward, and they don't have the funding to be able to hire a third-party consulting firm to do that work for them, or to issue bid solicitations one-off of each other. And if we're trying to achieve economies of scale and try to get these systems on the roof and in the ground quicker, that is this new role that the CCAs are seeing themselves being able to fill, as being able to provide that technical assistance back to our customers to enable them to achieve these resilience goals that they've been working so long to achieve.
I second that because at MCS Miramar, we've been partners with the National Renewable Energy Lab in Golden, Colorado for nearly a decade, and we wouldn't have done anything that we've done without their support the entire time. Other military bases around the country are using national labs, and much of them are gaining success in the microgrid arena just by having their technical support.
Great, thank you. Other questions from my dais mates? Yes, please, Commissioner Douglas.
So briefly, one of the obstacles to microgrids that was discussed was just permitting challenges. Can you maybe describe a little more what some of the complexities can be once you've got a project that you're ready to build?
Let me understand the question properly. So, in the can you please ask the question again? I'm sorry, Commissioner.
It was actually, I think, your presentation, you raised permitting challenges as one of the challenges in front of microgrids. So I was hoping you could explain a little more about what some of those challenges are.
Yeah, so in the permitting process, it's very new to the cities that, we are deploying this renewable microgrids. They know how to permit a diesel genset very easily. There are lots of cases and, precedents that they can rely on. But when you are deploying a solar and a storage system together, there are challenges about how it is going to interconnect it, where you are basically going to, draw the service panels and all of that. And so I think in the city process, there are some questions. I have not seen too many of electrical, permitting questions, but I have seen sometimes, structural, civil, those type of questions a lot. So if there is a standardized way and the city permit AHJs, they know that, these are going to be deployed in this manner and there's awareness, then the permitting process can go faster.
Okay, thank you. Did anyone else
could I?
Please.
Yes, let's go to John and then we'll go back to David.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I was just thank you, Paul. From a healthcare perspective, the permitting, just by the nature of their essential facilities, it's many layered. They're regulated by OSHPD, which is OSHPD, which has been very proactive in starting to adopt these standards. But then there's the NFPAs that they reference, and the other challenge is we have its federal level CMS. So for a hospital, if you have a microgrid connected, to get licensed, you need to meet the federal standards. So there's a multi-layered agreements to get to ultimately. You can permit the project, but if it's a licensed hospital, there's some other challenges that need to be overcome. But the process has started. So it's I'm laying out a problem, not necessarily the solution, but I think time is not on our side. Mixing in the 21 days, we've gone from 72 to 96 hours, and now healthcare facilities are looking for backup power for 5 days. So, we have to overcome that somehow.
Right, and let me just do a super quick follow-up on that, especially in the hospital setting, because I know it is extremely challenging and also extremely valuable in terms of the use case. Aside from, say, getting an EPIC grant, what kinds of incentives might really move the needle? Could it be low interest loans? Could it be programs that help on rates? What makes the most sense for healthcare providers specifically?
That's a really good question. I think just one of the barriers we've come up against, a lot of them are not-for-profit. So, if the PPA model works well, I know Kaiser and other healthcare providers have adopted that. I think the other side is education. And maybe a slightly different point. One is is, I don't know, funding that, because there's a lot of people in healthcare operators, decision makers are very busy, and to ask them to do something that potentially is they're unsure of and put them at risk, say as a risk. I think investing in education, but just a small point, we did a presentation at Kaiser Richmond, and it was for the California Society of Healthcare Engineers. And usually we get about 10 or 12 people attend. The room was packed. We had to turn people away. And I felt really proud that they showed up. So I think there's an interest that these are the guys that, engineers, operators work in the boiler rooms day in, day out. So that was in the evening. They took their time out off their own back to come in. So I see there's interest. So we can educate them because they have a place in making decisions. Is it a diesel generator or is it solar storage? So, and
right.
Maybe it's an idea, education.
And I keep threatening to ask the last question, but I have one more just from what you just said, and that is, have you done an analysis of the performance of the microgrid, and compared to diesel generation? Because of course, diesel generators, you've got an upfront cost, but you've got this ongoing maintenance issue. You've got to buy fuel. You've got to make sure the fuel is fresh. It's not like you can set it and forget it. So, microgrids, if they're in place, should be better. They should be a lot better. But is that your experience and observation? Is that something that would resonate?
I think so. Yeah. Mike, do you want to answer that?
No, you can go first. I'll just add on. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, sure. No, I think it's that value proposition in our, I recently involved in a large medical office building in Marin, and we actually had to quantify the costs, the ongoing costs in there. They're fairly large in terms of value. One thing I could throw out there, which I think in the PSPS is noise in exhaust, because so I make sure this is relevant to your question, that we see if they're all bets you don't need to meet the local noise ordinances and also Bay Area air quality. So again, COVID, we're going to have more immune compromised people, but I think that's a value that when we looking at the dollars and cents I think there's going to be a lot of, at the end of this PSPS season, I hope it's short, but there's going to be a lot of unhappy people with 500 kilowatt diesel generators parked in their parking lot next to a residence. How do you quantify that value? Because if they're not well executed, these are other kind of sort of, say, intangibles, but things that will come up that microgrids and solar storage projects, that's not an issue. Anyway, I'm going off at a bit of a tangent, so hopefully that was informative. I better leave it to you, Mick, before you run out of time.
So all I was going to say was that in my mind, the more likely situation for microgrids in the future is to have all of these assets participating together. The comment in the beginning, I'm really working off of that we're trying to make resilience cleaner and quieter, not clean and quiet. I think part of the challenge is taking part in a 100% renewable microgrid earlier in my career. I know technology advances every day, but still the difference between doing 100% renewable and a mixed DER system like what we have a specific reason for every single type of technology that we have in our microgrid. And it all pays dividends to have those different technologies. Per electrical engineers at the National Renewable Energy Lab, we couldn't have a microgrid to successfully have resilience for our mission without diesel. And so I think the technical solution is something that the engineers can figure out, and the value for the renewables is most definitely there. Especially for the military, it is not good to rely on diesel fuel. So there's an obvious benefit to having natural gas generation, and also to have PV and on-site landfill gas generation for us. I know that MCS Miramar is extremely lucky to have those resources on site. But make no mistake about it, we are leveraging as much as possible of our on-site resources, but absolutely need the diesel to make our system work to meet the mission.
No, I think that.
So I know that.
I think, I'm sorry, just super briefly. You know, you guys did really great leadership work with 100% renewable microgrid. I think a lot of people in the state, though, you know, unfortunately, are sort of think they're in the 100% diesel backup mode, and so it becomes a question of, you know, what are the benefits to you of using less diesel and more renewable within this system that you know, for larger users most likely still includes some diesel, and that's where that trade-off is kind of interesting.
I'll just make one comment, Commissioner Douglas. So I was evaluating multiple hotels for replacing the diesel genset with on-site battery and a solar system, and the economics did not work out. Even in, like, you know, this is as recent as 3 months. The cost of diesel generator deploying it is one-time cost, but it was cheaper than actually putting the PV and the battery. I hope that going forward, you know, the prices come down, it becomes economical. For the smaller sites, that's still a challenge.
And I would
take one last word in, but we'll just do one last comment in from Jesse. I know this is so exciting and fun to talk about. We could talk for many hours. I think our 90 minutes has gone by so quickly, but let's hear from Jesse. And then we had said that we would take a few comments in from the audience as well. And so Ching has those teed up for us. So Jesse, and then we'll turn over to Ching, please.
All right, great, thanks. I would just add that, you know, right now there's a focus on PSPS events, but we still are looking at the potential for a major earthquake. And if there were a major earthquake, that the natural gas grid could be down, according to the Lifeline Council, for up to 30 days. And the roads would be closed, which would inhibit the ability for diesel fuel to actually be delivered. And when we're talking about critical public facilities like shelters, libraries, fire stations, you know, at some of these facilities, cities and counties don't actually own diesel generators at these sites. They have contracts with diesel generator providers, and there's no guarantee, for example, if there was a hurricane happening at the same time on the East Coast, that the diesel generators would actually be delivered to these sites. So, you know, thinking about the scale of the site, and the appropriate combination of technologies, you know, for libraries and community centers, schools, a solution that is on-site renewables with battery energy storage does work because of these other factors. I would also encourage the state to consider what the value of resiliency is, because as somebody noted earlier, for some of these smaller systems, like a 5 kilowatt system or a 6 kilowatt system at a fire station, the economics of that can be kind of hard. And if you then factor in what the value of that resiliency is separate from a traditional return on investment, then that kind of helps get decision makers over the line in thinking about what is the value of an avoided loss of life? What is the value of social continuity and security because you have lights on at a sheltering location and there isn't crime that ensues because there are no lights? Or, you know, and San Francisco had looked at this through their resiliency work. So there is kind of the start of that effort. But I would also encourage kind of what is the value of that resiliency so that that can start to be considered by decision makers in addition to the kind of traditional return on investment that everyone looks at for project deployment.
Great. Let me turn it over to Ching to ask a couple of questions. I think we have about 5 minutes, so let's do that kind of in a lightning round way, and then we'll open it up to the public comment. Ching, take it away, please.
Yes. This is Ching, and we got a lot of interest from the online participants, so we probably will not have time to go through every one of them. I will have to distill the information and, you know, trying to select most relevant to our panel. The first question, I think we have a lot of interest on the, you know, how can we use microgrid to help address PSPS event. There were a number of questions on how, for the existing microgrids, how long can this microgrid provide power during a PSPS event? And what kind of resilience duration have you or will you consider for microgrid design to help address PSPS? As you all know, PSPS events are expected to be days, not hours.
I can go first, Jim. Thanks for that question. So in our case, the way we design our system is we design it for 24-hour resiliency. Now, it's a function of the size of the battery, the critical loads, and all of that. So we carefully design that system and tell the customer that if you basically get, it has to be financially viable first. If you get this size of the battery, if you shed your loads to this level, and let's say you have 50% solar production because of the smoke and all of that, then you will get a 24-hour resiliency, and then we work backwards. That's how we design our systems.
And for the systems that we're sizing the solar and storage to meet critical loads at the public critical facilities, those are for a 5-day grid outage or 120 hours.
Yeah, if I could just add, from my, not designing, but for my clients, it seems to be 5 days the desire to have backup power, let's say, designed for.
And
is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, on the military side, I think it's a little bit more stringent. The Department of Defense is calling for 14 days. And with our system in particular, given the on-site resources and available fuel on the air station, we suspect, given the usage of all of our disparate DERs, we can run for 21 days without an external fuel supply. But if the natural gas pipeline goes down, if the landfill power goes down, that time frame starts to diminish. But our goal in operation is to have the most flexibility as possible. So that's why we are implementing the demand response control capability that we think will give us about 1.5 megawatts worth of control across the air station. And I think that when you're talking about days, not hours, there's so many different contingency operations and so many things to consider anyway that it's very difficult to plan and design for those outcomes. Before we were looking at microgrids and we were looking at PSPS events, now all of a sudden there's COVID and there's another thing to consider. And it's interesting that you never know what's going to be thrown at you. And I guess our perspective is to just make everything as redundant as possible for the most amount of flexibility.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, so another thing I want to point out is, for our Fremont microgrid project and also Richmond microgrid project, actually we started the project about 6 years ago. At that time, and we don't even have a PSPS. So things are evolving as we are, moving along. And I also want to, here's the second question. It's about the, about the optimization. So how many of these microgrids optimize electric and thermal loads, vice versa, or just electric load?
Yeah, sorry, I was muted.
Vipul?
Yeah, quick.
Can you take this one?
Yeah, quick response to that one. So in our case, what we do is we start with electric. We look at the thermal loads. If the thermal load, and again, I'm talking about small to mid-sized facilities, and not large facilities. If the thermal load is low enough, then we ignore it. But if it is a little bit larger, let's say 25% in electrical terms of the total electric load, then we try to offset that. But normally we don't consider thermal loads in our microgrid design to keep the cost low.
So
I could just add that our system, in terms of electrical optimization in island mode, the system basically uses all the available generators in the power plant, and we've proven that we cannot island with only natural gas engines. We need at least one of our diesel engines. And when the system is stabilized, we integrate the landfill power. The landfill power, in terms of electrical, has its challenges in that the gas has problems and with the electrical output. And so we need spinning reserve online for integrating those renewables just in case they go down. They're less reliable than the generation assets in the power plant. But those renewable sources greatly reduce the fuel, obviously, in island. And our system, when grid connected, operates entirely off of economics. So if natural gas is needed to supplement a landfill generator dropping offline and causing a peak for our installation, then the natural gas will be used and the diesel won't be used because it's not economical.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mick. I want to save the last question for Jesse. How does the CCA coordinate with utilities, for example, PGE's Community Resource Center, which serves as a similar purpose during a PSPS event?
So that's a good question. Right now, we've been coordinating more directly with our local government partners on sizing the sites that they have, that they've identified across their different hazard mitigation and energy response plans as needing to serve the community in time of grid outage. We are on email communications with PG&E, who's identifying community resource centers where they are deploying resilience centers, but we are not informing that particular process. So they're a little bit, they are definitely separate efforts that don't really have a lot of crossover. The sites are not necessarily interconnected to each other.
Okay, thanks, Jesse. So we're close to the end of this panel, so I would like to wrap up our time for Zoom Q&A. I'd like to turn the meeting back to our Vice Chair, Scott.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I appreciate having the chance to get some questions from the audience through Zoom, so thank you for facilitating that for us, Ching. I also want to say thank you so much to our panelists for what I think was very interesting and data-rich presentations. As you can probably tell, we could ask you questions for the rest of the day, but we won't. So thank you so much for being part of today's discussion. What we're going to do now is transition into the public comment. So panelists, you are welcome to stay with your videos on. You are also welcome to turn your videos off if you like. I would like for my fellow dais members to please keep their cameras on as we listen to our public comment. And I'll hand it over to Heather Raitt, who will walk you through how to do that and get that part going for us.
Thank you, Vice Chair. This is Heather Raitt. I would just like to remind folks, I see a couple hands up, but if you did want to make public comments, go ahead and click that raise hand icon now, or press *9 if you're on the phone. And we are fortunate enough to have Rosemary Avalos with us today from the Energy Commission's Public Advisor's Office to walk through the public comment process for us. Thanks so much. Go ahead, Rosemary.
Thank you, Heather. I'm Rosemary Avalos with the Public Advisor's Office, and I'll first call on attendees using the raise hand feature on Zoom. Please state your name and affiliation for the record. Also spell your first and last name after you are unmuted and before commenting. And please do not use speakerphone feature when talking because we won't be able to hear you clearly. And now I'll move on to AD. You're unmuted. Go ahead and make your comment.
Hello, this is Allie Detrio. Name is spelled ALLIE DETRIO. I'm with the Microgrid Resources Coalition. First, just wanted to say thanks to everybody for the great presentations today. A lot of really great questions and information. Since I know we're pressed for time, I just want to underscore one major point, even though I have several things I would love to comment on if there were more time. Departing load and standby charges are the single largest financial barrier to microgrid deployment in California. All non-net metered systems are subject to these charges. You heard the folks at Miramar where they don't even understand the full economic impact of their microgrid because of the departing load charges and how detrimental they are to the overall cash flow and economics. Exempting microgrids from departing load charges is the single most impactful thing the state of California could do to accelerate the deployment of microgrids across the state. You could consider it a form of economic stimulus that the state can implement without having to spend any money. Modernizing standby charges so they're more fairly calculated based on real world circumstances is also something that really is important, as well as really evaluating interconnection costs and looking to standardize a lot more of those costs when we're looking at systems that are not net metered systems. So I just really want to stress that to all of the participants here, that removing some of these financial barriers will result in California becoming much more resilient, much, much faster. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to remind phone users that to dial *9 to raise your hand. And are there any other comments? Please raise your hand. I'm going to give a few seconds to allow people on the phones just in case they want to dial *9. Okay. Tanya, your line is unmuted.
Hi, I just wanted to publicly comment, and I think throughout the presentation, several of the presenters sort of touched on this. As we better match load shape to the capabilities of our different energy assets in a microgrid portfolio, and obviously when you've got a nice big campus like a military base, you've got more diversity in the generating assets and storage assets that you can deploy. But as we look at more deployment of clean assets for longer durations, several of the presenters sort of alluded to the importance of the ability for loads to better match those storage and generation profiles. I've raised this in other forums before, but I think as we start to move these microgrids into smaller and smaller asset portfolios or aggregations of buildings, it's going to be very important that we have smart, interoperable, connected loads that are able to respond to either grid signals or to signals from a microgrid controller in a standardized way that will help reduce the cost of implementation for these systems. I know we're at the very high level right now, looking at general microgrid interconnections. These are big projects. There's a lot of specialized engineering, but I'm hearing many communities that are looking at 2045 goals. One of their big deals is electrification of loads by 2030. And in the state of California, that's a massive lift in 10 years to electrify all end uses. So while we're doing that, I just want to have on the record that we should really be thinking about smart communication, command, and interoperable open standards that can be used for smart loads to better match them with clean storage and clean generation in our asset portfolios.
Thank you, Tanya. And
Rosemary?
we'll move on to, yes?
I apologize. This is the court reporter. Can you please ask Tanya to identify herself and her organization?
Okay. Go ahead, Tanya.
Thank you. My name is Tanya Barham. I'm with Community Energy Labs.
And can you spell your name, please?
Yes, Tanya. Last name is spelled B as in boy, Arham as in mother, Barham.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tanya. And we'll move on to Sharmila Ravula. Your line is unmuted.
Hi, this is Sharmila Ravula. I'm representing the Emerge Alliance, which works on DCE standards. The name is SHARMILA, and last name Ravula, RAVULA. There are two different aspects I would like to just put on the public record. One is since we are looking at microgrids at a community scale, as well as at the site level, for the community microgrids, one thing that I think will be great to explore in terms of these proceedings will be how you could encourage front of the meter coupling of solar and storage, and having community scale systems support low income neighborhoods and DAC communities on the residential and commercial level, because that is of high priority for the state of California. And the other point that definitely needs to be explored, and that has been brought up by multiple presenters today, is the financing. So one thing that could really help with the challenges of financing is looking at options where the CCAs and IOUs could potentially own these assets, so that it makes it much easier for these microgrids to proliferate. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ravula. Are there any other comments? Please raise your hand. Okay. And if you are on the phone, dial *9. Okay, I have commenter AD. Go ahead, your line is unmuted.
Hi, this is Allie DiTrio again. Since there doesn't seem to be a lot of comments, I would like to make one more. I was the one that asked the question about microgrids, including electric and thermal loads, and optimizing both types of energy sources. And I think it would be really beneficial for all stakeholders to think through how clean fuels can play a role in microgrids, because optimizing both electric and thermal loads can result in really significant efficiency gains. And so when we are looking at the loading order and looking at how we can first reduce overall demand and really optimize these resources, thinking through how we can optimize the use of clean fuels and integrate electric and thermal loads, those are really important things to also consider with microgrid deployment. I know most of these here seem to focus on electric only, but we can gain significant efficiencies through optimizing electric and thermal loads.
Okay, thank you, Ali. I have Tanya, your line is unmuted. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to move on to the phone line, and I will call the last 3 digits of your phone number. It's 682. Go ahead, your line is unmuted. 682. Okay. All right. That concludes the comments from those on Zoom and on the phone, and we'll go ahead and hand over the meeting to Heather.
Thank you, Rosemary. Actually, if we want to just go ahead and Vice Chair, move on to closing remarks.
Absolutely, and I think I may save my closing remarks for the end of the day on Thursday after we've had a chance to hear from all of our panelists. But let me turn to my fellow dais mates and say if anyone would like to make a closing remark today. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands raised. Oh, Commissioner Shimoma, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to thank everyone. Thank you, Vice Chair Scott. And check out our scoping memo that was issued this past Friday. It is pretty high level, certainly, but I think that a number of the points that were brought up by not only our panel members, but also by some of the commenters today will be addressed and covered in our Track 2 proceeding. And while there's not a date set yet, we do also intend to hold a workshop on alternatives to diesel. And again, for the 2020 fire season, we have a reliance on diesel because at the utility scale that we were addressing, the parties participating in that proceeding did not bring in alternatives, readily available alternatives, as Jessica Teese said, be a plug and play. But in this workshop, we do hope to hear about whether there are viable alternatives for 2021. Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Scott.
I just wanted to add my thanks to Vice Chair Scott for all her work on this last year, and Commissioner Sharoma, and just to say that there are a suite of activities that simultaneously help us adjust to and survive the consequences of climate change, including microgrids, which can help keep the lights on, and also help prevent climate change from getting worse. And so this is really in that sweet spot of reducing emissions, but also building resilience and reliability. And what we're doing in California is very much a template for other states. I think we're all mindful of that. So the stakes are high for that reason as well. So just really wanted to thank all the staff and the stakeholders, and look forward to the ongoing discussion in the days ahead.
Yes, President Batcher.
Hi, thank you, Vice Chair, Scott. I want to add my thanks to the presenters today and the commenters. I took a raft of notes. I found this extremely informative. So thank you so much for putting this together and bringing such rich presenters to us today. There's much to be done, and as I said earlier, my concerns have been very much focused on the very near term in terms of the backup generation for not only energy, but also our telcos, all of which right now are planned to be diesel, nearly all. So, but thank you. David is always the optimist, and I always appreciate his optimism that we're making our way through this suite of opportunities for a clean future. So thank you all very much for all your hard work today. Appreciate it.
You are welcome. Thank you all so much for, I see Neil waving also. Neil, please go ahead. You're on mute, Neil.
Thanks for catching that. Thank you. Besides that, thank you for the opportunity to listen and learn quite a bit more about the cost trade-offs people are having to make on balancing these additional resources and capabilities while also providing the redundancy and resiliency they need. I think that's helping us clarify the situation when we're looking at where there's potential for microgrids to be playing a larger role. So that really factors into some of our thinking. So I do want to thank you for the session and the chance to participate. Thank you.
Thank you. You are more than welcome. So it is wonderful to have all of you here today. I want to thank our participants, our very informative and robust panelists. Thank you to my dais mates, as always, and to our fantastic IEPR team who helps make these run so smoothly so that we can spend our time getting all of this excellent information. I just want to remind folks that our next session is on Thursday, July 9th. It starts at 10 a.m. We will have the third and final session for the Microgrids workshop on Thursday, July 9th at 2 p.m. And you can also see on your screen here it's in the middle of my screen, but it may be in the top right of your screen where the written comments are. So we are always delighted to hear from people in more detail. There was a call for data from Mike Gravely on microgrids not funded by the Energy Commission. And we heard some other calls for data as well. So please do send that information to us, the written comments, and you can see right here on your screen how to do that. And with that, thank you so much, everyone. We are adjourned until Thursday at 10. I'll see you then. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.